Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. The July 2025 Basho is over, and that was an outcome, huh? But performances are for the recap, that comes later. Right now, we talk rankings, it is the instant Banzuke, so we're gonna set it up with some math and then go from there. Alright, that's done. Let's talk about how this is all going to play out. Starting at the top, we have our Yokozuna. Hoshoryu dropped out with one win. Onosato, in a tournament where a lot of people thought he was struggling, still got to 11. So, Onosato is going to go from west to east, because he had more wins. Hoshoryu drops over to west, but they're still the Yokozuna. That's how they're going to get set up. Kotsuzakura, he is the only Ozeki, he had a winning record, he's going to still be the only Ozeki, so he is Ozeki East. Wakataka Kage and Kirishima. Now, I have them set up like this because Kirishima was Sekiwake 1 West, and Wakataka Kage was 2 West, so Kirishima was higher. But Kirishima had a lesser record. Now, this is a question that comes up fairly often nowadays. If there's two Sekiwake with winning records, but the lower ranked one has a better record, are they going to move him in front? By and large, I have said no, but in this case, I think it's different. And the main reason is that Daisho was here, and now he is gone. He has dropped way down. So really, this spot is empty. Plus, Wakataka Kage, it wasn't close, it was 2 wins rather than 1, and we've seen that can make a difference, so Kirishima can be bypassed by Waka without that actually affecting his rank. He doesn't get quote-unquote demoted. So I see no reason for them not to promote Wakataka Kage from 2 West to 1 East, leave Kirishima in place, and then the winning record gets a little bit of a benefit. Also, it looks better if Wakataka Kage is the top Sekiwake when he is actually on an Ozeki run now. There are people who talk about, oh, so-and-so is on an Ozeki run, and I'm like, yo, let's slow your roll. The dude needs like 13 wins to get there, and he's not gonna do that. But Waka, he needs 11 now. He had 12 in May, and he had 10 here. 11 is very reasonable for him. This is a legit Ozeki run, so popping him to the top of the Sekiwake list makes a lot of sense. I've got Takayasu sliding from Komusubi West to Komusubi East, and Anishiki going from Maegashira 1 East to Komusubi 1 West because Takayasu ended up with only 1 fewer win than Anishiki. If things had gone quite a bit differently, like Anishiki ended up with 12 or 13 wins and Takayasu only had 8 or 9, this might be different. But with only a 1 win difference between them, there's really no reason for this to not happen. It would be not just shocking, but really dumb for Anishiki to go to Komusubi East and Takayasu to stay in place. So that seems like a pretty easy call. Mathematically, Tamawashi is actually way up here, and Abi is just a little bit up here. Now, if you're new to this stuff and you haven't done the math, you don't know what I'm talking about with the math, real quick, it's wins minus losses equals rank increase. So 11 minus 4 equals 7. So when we set this up, we move Tamawashi up 7 ranks. So he's not at this low Komusubi thing, he's at 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we move him up 7 slots to create the relative order, but with the Sanyaku here, it gets a little confusing to actually move him into that spot. It's like, why is he Sekiwake? So I'm just leaving him and Abi below the actual Sanyaku guys. They're not going to be in the Sanyaku. But Tamawashi is way ahead of Abi mathematically. And because Tamawashi was in the Joy, he had that Sanyaku schedule, there's really no reason for him not to end up ahead of Abi. So really, it should be Tamawashi at 1 East and Abi at 1 West. Both of them are getting seriously under-promoted as far as the math goes, but there's nowhere for them to go. They're not going to make a new Komusubi slot for these guys with these records at these ranks. You can look at it as both of them are getting screwed or neither one is getting screwed, but in either case, there's no reason to bump Abi ahead of Tamawashi. If they do, again, that wouldn't just be shocking, it would be really dumb. Next, we have Oho, Hakuoho, and Atami Fuji. Now, as a rule, we've been putting guys who are in the Joy, those top 16 wrestlers, ahead of guys coming up from lower ranks, in a tiebreaker scenario. Now, last time, a lot of us were a little surprised to see Hakuoho get pushed ahead of Hiradoumi and Tamawashi in that situation. But that was a little bit different. in that case, Hakuoho was 8-7, but he had kept needing to fight Sanyaku opponents even though he was well out of the running, and it looked like almost like sort of an apology, like hey, we, the situation actually did you kind of dirty. We understand that was a really hard schedule, so we're going to give you that little bit of a bump, because Hirodoumi and Tamawashi were both 6-9, bumping them back. They still only went down a rank and a half, which is still pretty good when you're 6-9, so that all kind of made sense. In this case, there's no way Oho is going to end up below both of these guys. I don't think there's any chance that happens. Atami Fuji was lower, so Hakuoho last time was more mid-ranks. He was Maegashira 7, Atami Maegashira 10. He also only had 2 Sanyaku opponents. So even though they don't have to do this, I'm going to assume they put him at 3 East. So the question becomes, does Hakuoho or Oho go to 2 East? Well, in the past, I probably would have just assumed they leave Oho at 2 East because Hakuoho is getting an over promotion anyway, and they could very well do that. But because they've made more of a point in the last year or two to demote guys on losing records when they can, I think it's actually a little more likely that Hakuoho goes to 2 East and Oho gets bumped back. This is not a given, unlike with Tamawashi and Abi, where it could go either way, but Tamawashi's probably in front. Hakuoho in front of Oho is maybe 55-45. That one could really go either way. But if Atami Fuji is anywhere but 3 East, I'm going to be really surprised. And part of the reason I'm going to be really surprised is because Gonoyama is next to him and he was 6 West. So it's not like another guy from those esteemed Joy ranks. It's just another mid-rank scrub. So there's no reason for him to get ahead of Atami Fuji. And he slots into place nicely at 3 West. So that's pretty good for him. Now, what do we do with Wakamoto Haru? Koto Shoho is, again, he won the Yusho. He had an amazing tournament, but Hirodoumi, technically in the Joy, I think he had 4 Sanyaku opponents. Wakamoto Haru ate the whole meal. He doesn't have to fight his brother, obviously, but he had 6, and 1 West is right in the thick of it. So there's no chance Wakamoto Haru gets over-demoted in favor of Koto Shoho. That's not happening. Given that Wakamoto Haru was 1 West and Hirodoumi 5 East, Koto Shoho should end up at 5 East. Plus 10, pretty good, even with a 13-2 record. That's solid, nothing wrong with that. Now, do they put Hirodoumi ahead of Wakamoto Haru or behind him? This, again, pretty much a coin flip. There is a logic to say Wakamoto Haru, he had 1 West, very tough schedule, like one of the toughest schedules you can have. So we'll give him that little bit of a bump. Hirodoumi was only 8-7, and they are still sort of limiting guys on 8-7 because it's like you barely had a winning record. We're not going to be too nice to you. But on the other hand, 8-7, 8-7, 1 rank up. 6-9, 6-9, 3 ranks down. This is very clean. This works out very nicely. So are they feeling aesthetic or are they feeling more logical? I don't know. That seems to change by the basho. My inclination is to say Wakamoto Haru ends up ahead, but I think that's just because it's what I think is more correct and what looks better to me. This is definitely a little bit of a personal bias coming into it because I think this is very much a coin flip. I think this is 50-50. Go either way with it. I don't know. Now, a better question here is Ichi Yamamoto and Onokatsu. Now, Ichi is a half rank ahead of Onokatsu. Ichi was 9-1, but as soon as the schedule got tougher, he fell to pieces. Onokatsu had to fight all of the toughest guys, and he did okay. It would not be the least bit surprising or unreasonable to see Onokatsu get bumped ahead. He's only half rank behind. They're not bringing him up from like way further down to make this happen. I actually think that this is more likely. They've been doing weird things, getting away from the math in little ways in Banzuke's more recently, and I think this is a very likely decision for the committee to make. There wouldn't be anything wrong with Ichi going to 5 West and Onokatsu to 6 East. It just doesn't seem quite as likely to me given recent decisions. Now, I goofed. Takano Sho should actually be tied with Ura. My bad. But Kusano first. Kusano should go up to 6 West. That's pretty good for him. Now, there is another possibility. Kusano could stay at 7 East because they have been trying to limit the promotions for guys from lower down to what they should get and not over promoting them if they don't have to. And they could put Oshoma in here. That being said, Oshoma was such a disaster that I wouldn't really be surprised if they're like, just push him further down. This guy was terrible. What you're looking at here is logical, and it would definitely fit with them favoring the Joy and especially Sanyaku wrestlers over guys from the lower ranks, but man, it just looks wrong to me. This is a vibes thing, and vibes things, the more I do this, the slightly more likely my vibes are correct, but not necessarily always. But man, my vibes are just saying Kusano stays in front of Oshoma, because Oshoma, it's not a benefit to Kusano, it's to make a point to Oshoma, you sucked. You need to be better if you get up to those ranks. That was terrible. Get further down. Shame, shame, shame. They could put him further down, so he was mathematically at 9 East. Takanosho and Ura were ahead of him, but they did not nearly as well. They were not nearly as dominant. So I think it makes a lot more sense for Oshoma to stay ahead of them. Takanosho, he had the better record. He had the 9 wins, so he probably stays ahead of Ura. Ura, Maegashira 8 East. Hey, 9 East, he had a pretty good tournament, right? I think 8 East next time is going to be a little tougher just because the competition around him is going to be tougher, but this is quite a reasonable place for him to land. And now we come to another question. Midori Fuji, Fujinokawa, Shurinaumi, and then Kinbozan. So Kinbozan is behind all of them, but Kinbozan was in the Joy. Is there a possibility that Kinbozan goes to 8 West so that Midori, Fuji, and Chura all stay with the exact promotions they're supposed to get? Yes, it is possible. Are they going to do that? Maybe, but I am disinclined to think that they will. A lot of it has to do with decisions that they've made recently, like when they tanked Chiyoshoma a few bashos ago after he got a Kinboshi against Oshoryu with a Henka. A lot of us looked at that like, what are they doing? That doesn't make any sense unless they're actually mad that he Henka'd the friggin' Yokozuna. Well, Kinbozan threw 3 Henkas this basho. If their hatred for Henkas holds weight, then he really should not end up ahead of these guys. That should actually count against him on top of his really atrocious performance. That's getting almost into conspiracy level territory, but it's like you look at the evidence that you're given and you gotta at least acknowledge the possibility. What I think is gonna happen is one of 2 things. 1, Kinbozan lands here at 8 West. 2, Midori and Fuji go ahead of him and he lands at 9 West. He was only a half rank behind Chura, and for the same reason I think Onokatsu will end up ahead of Ichiyamamoto, I think Kinbozan will end up ahead of Chura. At the moment doing this draft, I think I like this a little bit better, Kinbozan going to 9 West, Midori and Fuji ended up ahead of him, but this is definitely not set in stone. I would be kind of surprised if he ended up between these guys. I can't see much of a reason for that, but I could see him at 8 West or 9 West. Take your pick with those. Then we've got Chura, then we've got Shodai, fits in nicely. Takeru, Fuji, Roga. Now, Roga and Matakayumi are tied, and usually when you're talking about lower ranked guys, the guy with the better record goes ahead. But if Matakayumi goes ahead, then Roga gets over-demoted, and that could happen. They've been less shy about doing that recently, but I don't think they're going to do it this time. But I'm not going to assume that as a default. For the moment, I'm going to put Matakayumi at 12 East. I think it's absolutely plausible he goes to 11 West and Roga gets bumped down further, but that's not something I'm going to say in a draft. I'm going to have to think about that and whether I really believe they'll do that. And then maybe I make the change for the official prediction when we get closer to the basho. Another possibility for Matakayumi's placement is that he goes to 12 West so that Daisho ends up at 12 East. And this is another reason to think Roga will be at 11 West, because they're not going to put Matakayumi at 11 West and then like Daisho at 12 East and make Roga go down 2 ranks. That's dumb. But if they want to do Daisho a little bit more of a favor than just put him at 12 West like this, then the way to do it would be Roga stays at 11 West, Matakayumi to 12 West, Daisho to 12 East. Either way, because Takeru, Fuji, and Roga, if they go down any further, they get over-demoted, I think Daisho lands somewhere at 12. For the moment, we'll put him in at 12 West. That should be fine. And oh my god, he should absolutely kill people as long as he's healthy in September. But yeah, I've got Matakayumi and Daisho at 12 in one order or the other. Now, the Juryo guys coming up. Mita won the Juryo Yusho from Maegashira 11, so he's not coming up. The guys who are getting promoted they didn't do amazing. So I don't think there's going to be much argument for them to go ahead of any of these Makuuchi guys at all. So let's just start moving these dudes up. So we've got Meisei, 13 East. Toki Hayate, 13 West. Sada no Umi, 14 East. Asakoryu, 14 West. Tobizaru, 15 East. All of these are perfectly fine. Now let's put Shonen no Umi, Tomokaze, Nishikigi, and Ryuden. Now, there's 2 spots left. The last Basho only went to 17 West, but because Daisho came out of the Sanyaku and nobody is entering, it shrinks, so we have an extra Maegashira slot. Well, who's going to get it? Shishi's definitely going to get saved. There's nobody else from Juryo who has earned their way in the division. Shishi at 7 and 8, keeping him in place or even a half rank down at 18 East is totally fine. He'll stay. So who gets the last slot? Well, it's probably gonna be Hitoshi. And this one, normally when I do these, I just go in pretty blind, but I knew that Kotoeho's placement was gonna be a question mark because he won on the last day. So I did a little bit of research on this, and this is what I found. January was the last time that somebody who didn't make it to Makuuchi mathematically still got promoted, and there was a guy who could have kept his slot instead. So Shirokuma, Juryo 4 East, 9 and 6, so he went up to Juryo 1 East, which is the same spot mathematically as Hitoshi right now. Kageyaki was 6 and 9 at 16 West, Tamashoho was 6 and 9 at 16 East. So they mathematically went to Juryo 2 East and Juryo 2 West. Shirokuma was the only question mark, so if he was kept in Juryo, that would have been in favor of Tamashoho. That didn't happen, Shirokuma got bumped up. Now, what is possible is that in this instance, Shirokuma got bumped up because the committee decided, well, we're not going to keep Tamashoho up, but not Kageyaki. That looks bad. That doesn't make sense. In other words, if there had only been one of them in position to possibly be saved, they would have, and Shirokuma would have been kept in Juryo. Problem is, there's really very few instances recently in the last couple of years where we can look at a similar situation and try to take anything away from it. The only other one I found was from January of 2024, where Endo was 5 and 10, and he mathematically went to Juryo 1 West, and we had Toki Hayate, who mathematically went to Juryo 1 East, but that was only a half rank difference, and Endo got saved. So if we take all that into consideration, where Shirokuma was a rank and a half ahead, and he got pushed into Makuuchi ahead of a guy, and in this case, Hitoshi is 2 ranks ahead of Kotoeho, I gotta say it's probably gonna be Hitoshi. That seems like the safest bet, so that's what we're gonna go with. Now the better question here is, does he just go to 18 East, or does Shishi go to 18 East and Hitoshi to 17 West? And given how they tend to do Juryo promotions, I have no idea. They could genuinely go either direction with this, but for the same reason why I bumped Oho back further up, I'll bump Shishi back here. At least he gets a demotion. There's a space for him to get a demotion while still staying in the division. Why not do it? But don't be shocked if Shishi and Hitoshi switch spots from what I... Alright, moving to Juryo. Daiseisan should get bumped over to 1 East. Nishiki Fuji, Oshoumi. We're just gonna move Nishiki Fuji up. Oshoumi, I had big hopes for him, but he kind of fell apart towards the end. Kotoeho, Juryo 2 West. He could end up ahead of Nishiki Fuji and Oshoumi because he's coming down from Makuuchi, but I really have no idea, and it doesn't matter that much. These guys are all gonna be in good position to make it to Makuuchi in November, and that's what really matters the most. Kageyaki slides up. Mita slides up. Could Endo and Chiyoshoma end up ahead of them? Absolutely. We could end up with Endo and then Chiyoshoma, or reverse that. But what we're probably going to get is Kotoeho ahead of these 2 guys, so the Makuuchi guys getting bumped ahead, or Shikifuji, Oshoumi, Kotoeho, and then Endo and Chiyoshoma behind Kageyaki and Mita. Now, I say that's probably what we'll get, which means it's probably not what we're going to get. It's just those are the 2 things that make the most sense. For them to do anything else would be much more arbitrary, and I'm not going to try and take a guess at what kind of arbitrary nonsense they're going to pull. Tochi Taikai, -1 on 7 and 8, so he should be right there. Under normal circumstances, I might not be surprised to see Kaio end up ahead of Fuji Seiyun, and in fact that could happen here. However, Kaio is tied with Tohakuryu, so the fact that he's going down at Juryo 6 East for 7 slots, which is what he should go down, Tohakuryu and Tamashoho are both going to get over-demoted, which sort of sucks. So the fact that Kaio ends up at 6 East is actually not that bad for him. Let's also bear in mind, oh god, I forgot all about this. So the fact that a guy left the Sanyaku and now the Maegashira ranks go down to 18 East means everybody's getting effectively promoted a half a rank. In other words, so Shishi was 17 West. He was the last guy in Makuuchi, number 42. If he gets bumped to 18 East, he'll still be the last guy in Makuuchi, number 42. So that's even more of a reason to expect the guys who are 7 and 8 to get bumped back at least a half a rank, because then they don't get relatively promoted, so to speak. They end up no higher than they were in the overall order of the Banzuke. So for Tohakuryu and Tamashoho, a half a rank is 1 slot, right? So normally 3 ranks is 6 slots. 3.5 ranks is 7 slots, but because of this relative thing, going down 3.5 means you're only dropping 6 slots, so it's actually a more appropriate promotion. I don't think there's any problem with this. That's what I expect to see happen. Hatsuyama, he goes up. Kotokuzan, he should go up. Will Hideno Umi end up ahead of either of them? Maybe. We could very reasonably see Hideno Umi end up at 7 West. Are they going to give him credit for continuing to fight and somehow coming up with that win against Onokatsu on the last day? Or are they just going to be like, man, he's busted, screw him? I don't know. Let's leave him ahead. I got to give him credit for continuing to struggle on and try to get those wins, but he could end up behind Hatsuyama and Kotokuzan for sure. I don't know. Now we're getting into range of the guys coming up from Makushita. So Shirokuma is going to bump over. We're not, just like with Juryo going into Makuuchi, the Makushita guys are going to get bumped down. So Tsurugisho should end up with no demotion. I know what I just said, that 7 and 8 staying in place means he's effectively going up a slot, but they are not going to move Asahakuryu to 9 West. That doesn't happen. Guys coming up from Makushita do not go that high. So in this case, I am going to leave Tsurugisho at 9 West, Hakuyozan is going to go to 10 East, Kazakeno to 10 West, Shiden to 11 East, and Takarafuji to 11 West. Now we line up the Makushita guys. Asahakuryu to 12 East, Ishizaki to 12 West, Kyokukayu, I hope I said that right, to 13 East. Oh wait, I forgot about Miyano Kaze. Oh my god, I'm so dumb. Okay, Miyano Kaze to 12 East, Asahakuryu to 12 West, Asanoyama 13 East, Kyokukayu 13 West, Ishizaki. No, not Ishii. Oh my god. Oh my god, what am I even doing? Ishizaki to 13 East, Kyokukayu to 13 West, Asanoyama to 14 East. Yes, that is how that should go. Oh my god. And now we just got to fill the last slot. Nishinoryu 5 and 2 at Makushita 5 East. So when you're at Makushita 5 or above, you're in the promotion zone, you can get bumped up, but he's only a half a rank ahead of Dayamami, who is 6 and 9 at 13 West, and going from 13 West to 14 West is at least some kind of a demotion on 6 and 9. Unless they bump Dayamami down because they're like, he's too broken, let's bring up the prospect. And honestly, I don't think they will, because Nishinoryu is not new to the sport. He's been kind of struggling through the lower divisions for a while. I think it's more likely Dayamami goes to 14 West, and Nishinoryu has put himself in position to get to Juryo in November with a simple Kachikoshi in September. And that is the Instant Banzuke for September 2025. As always, remember, this is a quick draft. These are just my initial thoughts. I haven't gone through this in any kind of detail yet. That's why I do a Banzuke prediction video before the Banzuke comes out, to make some adjustments when I've had time to think about this a little bit more. So if you want to tell me I'm wrong, now's the time. Hit the comments and tell me everything I'm doing incorrectly. Other than that, hope you enjoyed the Basho. If you didn't, I don't know if you really like this sport. Time for me to work on the recap. Look for that soon. Have a wonderful day.